Now let's talk about your front cover. So your front cover is just like I talked about. So for example, this is the one that I did for Alvin Lustig. And I had kind of a hard choice with him because some of his work is very kind of geometric like that, and then his book covers are a little bit more organic. But overall, in looking at his work, I saw more things that were like this. And then when I looked up his typography on Adobe Fonts, which is the first place you should go, I found that he had actually designed a typeface called Lustig. So make sure that you search for your designer on here. So I found that by doing some poking around. Be really keyed into the typography of your design period. So if you're doing, for example, punk rock flyers of the 70s, this is very, very type driven, and the type needs to have this kind of roughness, and you're likely to find something like this on DeFont. You can see here they use kind of the ransom letters, or they have this where it's dripping, type, misfits. Everything's just kind of crazy and different pieces. So that's extremely important. That's what maybe the cover of the book should be done in that. So key in on that for your cover. For mine, I grabbed some of the look, his typeface from Arts and Architecture, the lines. I thought that piece defined his work really well. So I kind of used, he likes circles and squares and geometry, and he likes red, black, and white. This is his typeface. So I felt like it tied in with all the rest of the look of the book. For the back cover, I just went with a solid version of the front. So you don't have to do anything complicated, but don't start something new. Don't put all new content on there as far as new pieces of work. And the back is really just to kind of sum it up. And also you can see that these page numbers don't need to be at the back. So I'm going to take those off by dragging none to the front cover and to the back. When you export this, it needs to have trim marks and bleeds, and by now that should be no problem. You should have a really good grasp on that. This is our last project that's for print, so it looks like this. These lines cut into the background on every page, whether it has bleed or not. Also, minimal hyphenations and widows. And remember, when you're dealing with a lot of copy, it's best to kind of set that up in the body copy style sheet. So in your body copy, make sure that, especially if you're using justification, that you minimize these settings so it's not too big of a span. You've got some glyph scaling. You could even do this 99 and 101. That will help a lot. And then also your hyphenations, make sure there's no more than 2 per paragraph. And I like words that have more letters in them to be hyphenated, so I have those settings also. But that's the best place to control something. However, once you finish, you really need to read your copy and make sure that there's not something that doesn't make sense. So for example, on this one, since there's not as much copy here, it might make sense not to break that paragraph. Might as well let it start there. Now they're almost even. So go through and read the copy, make sure there's nothing strange going on where it breaks. You certainly don't want to hyphenate someone's name or anything important like that. Image placement matches body copy. This is something else important that I'm seeing on some of the pieces that are starting to come through. In this one, I'm talking about his childhood. I couldn't find a childhood photo of Alvin Lustig, but this is the youngest one I found, and I feel like it kind of plays into it. And I used a graphic to kind of make the word creative stand out. This one, in this new visual language, is talking about typography and that he also was a furniture designer. So I had to find a piece of his furniture design to put there. So make sure you're reading the copy. If you're talking about logos, show logos. If you're talking about posters, show that. If you're talking about movie graphics, show that. Don't show a picture of the designer. I only put a picture of him here because I had nothing from his childhood, and I thought it was an interesting shot. And then legacy and impact, I thought this was a really thoughtful picture of him, so I put that on the back. I could put more graphics there, but I feel like I've covered it. Typography, furniture design, book design, for something so simple. So make sure that always where you're putting images, it's adding more meaning to the body copy. That as someone's reading it, they would be more drawn into the story if they could see a picture. That's when you put the picture. Page numbers are easy. I want those on a top layer and on the master page, so they always show up. And then let's talk about the wow factor. So there's a couple of things that will give this a wow factor. One is, depending on what designer you have, and all of these design periods have potential for this. You could grab some of the graphics and bring them in. So for example, this line is directly from this. And it just gave it a little bit of a style. This circle with a line coming out of it, I found in this piece of art over here. So I duplicated that. I duplicated these lines down here. There's the circle and the line. And then just a red square because he was really into those kind of geometry. And it seemed very final, almost like the period at the end, especially when his typeface has little squares and there's a square here. So that's a wow factor. The other thing is that because you don't have a lot of copy, you can actually lay this out with columns. Now, our Bauhaus zine had like 16 or 1800 word count. So that's not a lot of room for moving things around. But this one does have some space. So what you can do is go to pages. Now, if you want to put a column layout for all of the inside pages and you haven't done it yet, just go select all those pages by holding the shift key. Go to layout, margins and columns, and create a column layout just like we did for the Knoll brochure. So in this one, I decided on 6. Initially, I had 3, but then I realized it kind of didn't give me options for splitting areas. So I changed it to 6, and then my gutter is 0.125, which is really important. So everything in this brochure, even this chair, do you see how I lined it up with that line and I lined it up with this line? Both of these, even the artwork on this magazine. So now if you look at it, you can't tell that that's all dialed in like that, but it gives it a certain order and rhythm. Even my lines, I put those at 3 in. This is a 3-column block of text. This is 2 3-column blocks of text. And this one I didn't create by doing an individual box. What I did to create that was I just went to Object, Text Frame option. I created 2 columns. And remember I said the gutter is important on your column layout? That's because you want to match it here. So you can see, look in the preview, if you see if I make this gutter wider, it doesn't actually match the layout. So it has to be the same, and that's 0.125. Once I've given myself these columns, that I have a 6-column layout on every page, that gives me kind of a place to go. So this one, I made both of these blocks of text are 5 columns. So I varied my column width. This one is 3, this one is 4, and that kind of keeps it interesting. It keeps it from feeling too much like a textbook. You know, you want this to be a little bit more fun because it's a zine. This one is 4 columns wide. It's just kind of whatever seemed right for the page. So having that columns there works really well. The other thing you can do to kind of create impact is if you dive into the artist or period that you're working on, are there some good quotes? Maybe you could put inset copy. So maybe a piece like this chair, I could create a little inset here that talks about when this chair was designed and what it's called. And then I would come up with a style for this. So maybe this is 9 point and it's italic, light italic. And this is really tight letting. In fact, maybe it's 8. So that could give it kind of an interesting look too. And it's always nice to kind of read about certain pieces of art. So you can put quotes, you can reproduce pieces of the art, you can use inset copy, mix it up, dive in and really show us who this artist is or what this period is about and get into it. All right, I can't wait to see what you come up with.